Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Morning Blast. We've finally gone live now that Michael Brown has decided to bless us with his presence. It is Monday, the 27th of April, all day. You join myself and the timely Mr. Michael Brown for a Morning Blast, which, as we know by now, is a very candid market-related podcast where we go through, dissect what's important, what's not, go on a few random paths of ranting, and as it's Monday, it will be a bit of a look back over the weekend and a look back to the look forward to the week ahead. And what a busy week it is. Michael, how are you?
Yes, very good morning to you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for my tardiness this morning. I was on the phone to someone more important than you, so apologies.
Impossible.
It is very, very possible. Let me put it that way. And do you know what the good thing about it was? It was a phone call I could take at my desk, as opposed to when you ring me and I have to sort of shuffle out of the room very, very quickly at risk of saying something I can't have overheard.
Yeah, quite. And you always do sound very panicked when you answer the phone to me, as if to say something.
Most people are when Ryan Paisley flashes up on their phone. Let me assure you of that.
Well, as long as I'm in your phone as Ryan Paisley, that's a start. But anyway, moving swiftly on.
Clive, help!
Clive, right. Where's Clive Lambert? Oh, first off, anything we say on this is not to be taken seriously, and it certainly shouldn't be taken as trading or investment advice. But, right, let's crack on with our dear friend Clive Lambert over at Futures Techs for the update on market moves and levels to watch for today and, well, in the coming days. Where should we start? Equities would be handy. US markets bullish. S&P set new all-time high on Friday and another one overnight at 62.08 as
No, it didn't.
Did it not? Sorry, 72.08.
72.08.
It's a Monday. I've not had a copy yet. Nasdaq futures posted a large green candle on Friday with the Marabouzu support coming in at 27,215. Dow now lagging its counterparts. Dow's been an interesting one because obviously it's an index that we hate due to the nature of the makeup of it. But obviously it's been completely bashed around by the transport sector, isn't it? With Hertz or Avis,
yes.
whatever, one of the two that's kind of was up down 80% after a fourfold increase. And it's the weightings in that one are just horrendous. Why anyone would use the Dow as kind of just an index to invest in is beyond me.
Well, it's not a benchmark of anything. No money tracks it at all. And just to give you an idea, two stocks make up 23% of the index. They are Goldman and Caterpillar. So when you're in a market that's kind of back to the AI techie euphoria stage, it's not going to do the Dow any favors. But yeah, why anyone would look at it, trade it? I mean, I haven't had it on my watch lists or screens for donkey's years now. It's just utterly useless.
Yeah, when you see an expert start quoting Dow and using that as a reference point, the mask is slipping. It's got the old three fingers up like in Inglourious Basterds and stuff. But yes, one to stay away from is the bottom line. Why they haven't kind of remodeled that, I have no idea, to keep up with everyone else. But anyway, moving swiftly on. Europe equity markets, European equity markets, they're mixed, slightly less bullish than the US. DAX posted another doji on Friday. FTSE saw red again, but it's still north of the Fibonacci support at 10,328. In fixed income, the vibe is absolutely sell rallies at the moment, according to Clive. Green candles in the main, but offered overnight. Bond futures put green candles on charts, but offered overnight so far today. We stick to the sell rallies mode, according to Clive. FX markets, euro dollar bullish, held the 200-day simple moving average, something for the bulls. Put on some green on the chart on Friday after holding that simple moving average. That is something for the bulls to cry home about. Commodity metals posted mixed session on Friday, but obviously bullish all round really, except for nickel, which is still rallying. Next,
have they found out that all the nickel at the LME is just stones in bags again or something? Why does nickel keep going through the roof?
Something weird going on there, isn't it? It's definitely this is one of the problems, right? When it's such an illiquid market, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So definitely want to keep an eye on. Next,
before anyone at the LME comes to me, that was a joke, by the way.
Yes. Next upside targets for that are 21,395 and 21,750. In commodities, energy and carbon, quiet day on Friday for Brent, but bid for now in today's trade target is 112.12. TTF, the European natural gas, TTF posted a doji on Friday and has now had a quiet start to the week with 46 euros weighing for now. EU carbon markets sticking around the 75 mark. European carbon markets, waiting for fresh clarity there. And finally, from Clive in ag space, Ag's a bid. Obviously, we kind of focus on US agricultural markets, particularly corn in overnight trade above 468, looking for 481, then back to 87.4 high and spike from March. And that's it from Clive, I believe. Unless I missed anything. No.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you,
Thank
Clive.
you.
Right, we'll start in the Middle East. We'll keep this relatively brief because, to be honest with you, not a lot has really happened over the weekend. Just to recap, on Friday, obviously, as Clive kind of alluded to, or rightly alluded to, I should say, we did have quite an optimistic end to the week, markets being buoyed by reports that the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi would be hosting talks with Kushner and Witkoff in Islamabad over the weekend. Araghchi is on a kind of regional tour. He's been in Pakistan, he was in Oman, he's now off to see Putin in Russia, basically just trying to clock up air miles at this point, it seems. However, over the weekend, that trip of Witkoff and Kushner's to Pakistan was cancelled unilaterally by President Trump. The reason for this, Trump stating that there is, in his view, no point for negotiators to make an 18-hour trip, 36-hour round trip, to basically sit around and talk about nothing, when, again, in Trump's view, the US has all the cards and that Iran can call us whenever they want to make further progress. Importantly, it is very, very important to note that Trump later told Axios that the cancellation of the trip does not mean a resumption in the war. In fact, Trump said he hasn't even thought about that, which, I mean, I'm going to take him at face value on that front. And Trump was also saying that actually the talks could be done just as well on the phone. So here we are, ladies and gents. Donald J. Trump, 45th, 47th President of the United States, and now certified climate warrior, looking to get things done on Zoom rather than flying around the world. Interestingly, that Trump also noted later on Saturday on Air Force One that Iran had actually made another proposal within 10 minutes of Trump cancelling the trip, which was apparently much better than the proposals that they had made previously. And Axios sources overnight, around the time of the Globex Open, funnily enough, were noting that Pakistani mediators have given the US a new proposal from Iran, which involves reopening the Strait of Hormuz, then ending the war, and then discussing the nuclear issue in negotiations at a later date. Again, take that with a bit of a pinch of salt, but I think the overall message from this is, while talks didn't take place over the weekend as the market expected, the two sides are still in discussions. Neither side wants to re-escalate. Again, this would have been a really obvious open goal for Trump to re-escalate the situation if he wanted to, but he didn't. Exactly what he did with the ceasefire extension earlier in the week. So that's that. And of course, the other thing for commodity markets is that the Strait of Hormuz is still essentially blocked. So over 48 hours, nothing's really changed.
Yeah, on that. So obviously the new supreme leader for now, I'm going to butcher his first name, Mutaba Khamenei, obviously the son of the ex-leader.
Is he the cardboard cutout fella?
Yeah, he's the cardboard cutout. But he's military-aligned hardliner. But the problem is obviously he's got no diplomatic track record. You know, he's literally just been parachuted in. He's actually ordered the Hormuz closed he's actually, quote, under no circumstances does it return to its previous state. And he said that live to a deputy parliament speaker on Sunday. It was apparently shown on one of the kind of the state-run TV channels. So obviously this is now the boundary in which Araghchi is allowed to negotiate. So yeah, that shuttle between Muscat and Islamabad is in damage control inside a narrow mandate. So it does kind of also bring home that, there is a massive difference between ceasefires and like conflict resolution and what's happening with the Strait. Now, those two things are, the two outcomes from those things are kind of feels like they're getting wider and wider. Like we could have complete kind of conflict de-escalation on the kind of kinetic energy front. But, as some smart people in the room have been saying for quite some time now, such as like Rory Johnson, etc., that the Strait could be irreversibly changed, like how ships navigate that. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on. And obviously for markets, markets care more about what's going on with the Strait than what's being blown up in Iran. Let's be very blunt about that.
Indeed. I would just add to that, though, and I think Rory is very, very good at what he does, and I don't mean to take anything away from him whatsoever, but the Red Sea has been irrevocably changed. The Suez Canal has been irrevocably changed. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait has been irrevocably changed by what the Houthis were up to a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whenever the hell it was. Traffic levels through there have never got back to where they were before all of the stuff kicked off in Yemen, yet the world still functions. Yeah,
Yeah,
shipping costs
but
are probably a little bit higher, but I think, saying the Strait of Hormuz will never go back to where it was before is fine. It's just, it never goes back to where it was before, but the volume of oil getting out of the Gulf in total is pretty much where it was? Or is it never goes back
absolutely.
to where it was before and we have supply interruptions
No,
forevermore? I think those
absolutely.
are two very, very different
Yeah, I mean,
situations.
for things like, we got the crude pipeline that goes across the Red Sea, but then again, that hits another bottleneck. So again, I get what you're saying, but again, there's only so many kind of, passageways, maritime passageways and stuff that if they all start being irrevocably changed, which seems to be our word of the day, then we do start to have kind of more underlying structural problems. And also it just means further weakness to the supply chains globally, right? Because remember, this isn't just
Yes.
energy, this is fertilizers, this is, kind of liquids related to gas production and stuff like that kind of then feed through to fertilizers and, helium and all this stuff. So
Mhm.
where there is a will, where there's a market, there is a way. If prices become high enough, people will find ways to get stuff to where it needs to go. But it does just mean that it's a lot of maybe a bit of a rejiggery.
Yes, potentially long canal construction companies. Is that the trade of
Exactly.
the century? If
Absolutely.
anyone knows, write them on a postcard, please send them to us. That would be much appreciated. But yeah, the other thing I would just say in terms of the Middle East is just bear in mind the broader backdrop of what's going on. And what I mean by that, namely, is King Charles III is going to Washington, D.C. this week on a state visit. He's going to be doing an address to a joint session of Congress. He's going to be having a whole host of banquets and dinners with Trump and the First Lady,
Nice.
etc., etc. All very nice for him, I'm sure, and the people invited. However, just from a broader perspective, and this is not foolproof in any way, shape, or form, but do bear in mind that it's probably not going to be a great backdrop to re-escalate conflict in the Middle East when the king is in town. So do just potentially have that one on the radar as well. Although, of course,
Yeah.
nothing is a given or a certainty these days.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Let's move away slightly. Right. What else we got? We got Walsh.
Yes, indeed. He's on his way.
Finally.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, for those of you who have not been following this story, firstly, what the fuck have you been doing?
Well,
But secondly, just
or maybe you have a life outside of mine.
well, yeah, it's a long time since I had one of them. Anyway,
Can confirm.
yeah, exactly. Going back to, well, it was the start of the year, actually. I think it was the second weekend of January when Fed Chair Powell announced that the Department of Justice has sent the Fed board and Powell himself a number of subpoenas regarding an investigation they had opened, ostensibly regarding the Fed's building renovations. However, it was pretty clear that this was just a pressure tactic from the Trump administration to try and get Powell to lower rates. As a result of this, Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican senator on the Senate Banking Committee, was rightly up in arms and outraged, as I think most market participants were, and he said that he would not vote in favor of confirming anyone to the Fed board until that Department of Justice investigation was over. Of course, that posed issues for Kevin Walsh, Trump's pick for Fed chair, because the Senate Banking Committee is perfectly divided, and without Tillis's vote, Walsh or anyone else was never going to get out of committee. On Friday, news broke that the Department of Justice has now dropped its probe into Fed Chair Powell and the Fed board, with that probe instead being handed over to the Office of the Inspector General. Fuck knows who he is, but basically the key issue is it's not the Department of Justice, it is not a criminal probe, and as a result, Senator Tom Tillis has said that he is now prepared to vote in favour of Kevin Walsh's nomination to be Fed chair. That Senate Banking Committee vote is going to take place on Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, 3 o'clock in the afternoon here in London. There will then need to be a vote on the full Senate floor, which will take place a week or two later. But the nub of all of this is that it pretty much guarantees that Kevin Walsh will now take over as chair of the Fed from mid-May when Jay Powell's expires. And it also means that this Wednesday is pretty much certainly going to be the final time that we hear from Jay Powell at a post-meeting press conference.
What sad times, right? Get your hankies ready. It's going to be emotional.
Indeed. There is still one unresolved question amid all of this, which is, of course, does Powell decide to remain as a governor? He said previously, and now let me get the quote here because I want to make sure I get this right, because the specific quote that he gave at the March FOMC press conference was very, very precise indeed. And what he actually said was... You can tell we rehearsed this. Here we go. He said at the March press conference, I quote, "I have no intention of leaving the board until the investigation is well and truly over with transparency and finality." I don't know what Powell classes as well and truly over with transparency and finality, but
because on face
we
value,
will see on Wednesday, I guess.
Yeah, on Facebook, and obviously, I hope that's one of the first questions he gets asked, because otherwise, if it's something about, what's your opinion on banks trying to save the rainforest, then I'm going to throw something at my computer.
Yes, quite.
Because we need to get away from, unfortunately, we do need to get away from idiot reporters being in positions to ask questions that don't mean anything, because that does frustrate both, especially on and this is a week for them, right? We've got ECB, we've got BOE.
I've said a number of times that, and there may be media people listening to this. Hello, good morning. I've said a number of times, if you ask a stupid question like that about climate change or something that's not really in the central bank's remit, just take their press passes away.
Yeah, or at least give them one strike. Yeah, exactly.
Teach them a lesson.
Exactly that. I go and sit in the naughty step for a couple of months or whatever. But like we said, I think no one's going to deny that the mid-June meeting, Walsh's first, will be, potentially the most hotly anticipated one for as long as I can remember.
Massively.
And I think we're going to get a lot of talking heads. And unfortunately, what that means is we're going to get a lot of bullshit from social media trying to try and guess what he's about to say or what he really meant when he said this. So yes, it's going to be a bit of an interesting one to unpack, really.
Well, I think
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, this is not my base case. Let me stress that very, very clearly. But there is a world in which Kevin Walsh votes for a cut at the June meeting as chair. The remainder of the FOMC don't. And you have a chair dissenting against a committee decision.
Don't, mate. Can you imagine? I mean,
of course, the other thing then is the chair has to give a press conference. But what a lot of people don't realise, and actually, to be fair, I only realised this last year when we were digging into it, is that the FOMC press conference, yes, it's Chair Powell or Chair Walsh, as it will be, giving that press conference, but they're not giving their view. The press conference is supposed to represent the views of the committee, which makes it even weirder if, Kevin Walsh stands up going, I voted to cut, but here's what everyone else thinks, and I'm just the messenger boy.
Yeah. No, exactly that. Although I suppose it does give him an out. If he comes in, and kind of votes to cut and everyone else doesn't, obviously, and there's no cut, at least he can turn around to Trump and say, well, I did what you asked me to do. Now I can get on with it.
I tried.
Yeah. But it's very interesting, couple of months now for the Fed, as it always is. Right, what else we got? Obviously, we mentioned briefly about other central banks, and what a week ahead it is, right? So let's have a quick
absolutely.
glance at that.
Yeah, so we've got 5 G10 policy decisions coming up this week. Kicking things off actually overnight is the Bank of Japan. Just to stress, none of these central banks are expected to make any policy changes this week. It's all going to be a question of guidance. How are they viewing the current situation in the Middle East? Are they considering responding to that via policy shifts, aka rate hikes? And if they are, how close are they in terms of the timing to actually pulling the trigger on those moves? So, as I said, the Bank of Japan, they are meeting overnight. Their decision due in the very, very early hours of Tuesday morning for those of us here in London. Then into Wednesday, we hear from the Bank of Canada. And after that, the FOMC, of course, Powell's final press conference as Fed chair. And then into Thursday, we have firstly the Bank of England and then the European Central Bank as well. Of all of those, I would argue that the BOE and more so the ECB are probably going to be the ones that have the biggest potential for volatility in terms of market reaction, primarily because certainly the ECB, we've had a number of members alluding to the potential for rate hikes as soon as this meeting, or more likely at the June meeting. And then in terms of the Bank of England, obviously the BOE have been bitterly divided on policy for 4 or 5 years now. I would say there is a relatively decent chance that 1 or even 2 BOE MPC members, likely Chief Economist Hugh Bill and external member Megan Green, will at the very least sound very, very hawkish and potentially even dissent in favour of a 25 basis point rate hike. So a fair few moving parts. It's one of those weeks where yes, you'd look at the calendar and go, oh, no one's expected to change rates. This will be a snoozer. I can assure you it absolutely will not be a snoozer, because it's one of those weeks where every single word from every single banker is going to be poured over with a microscope.
Yeah, no, exactly that. It's going to be one for, I say the nerds, but I mean this in the highest possible terms, because obviously you are
people like me.
Yeah, you are a central bank geek, but that's why I love you. Well, but
Well, indeed.
But also, let's not forget that as well as having all of this on, as well as having, looking for headlines for the Middle East, as well as having all these central banks reporting or what are kind of announcing, making decisions, we also have a hell of a week for MAG7 earnings and earnings in
We
general.
do. Well, indeed, earnings in general. So 45% of the S&P 500 by market cap. Thank you to our good friend Andrew Hart for putting that in his email this morning. 35% of the S&P in terms of the number of individual stocks report earnings this week. It is by far and away the busiest week of first quarter reporting season. As you said, Ryan, the MAG7 names are very much going to steal the show. As if Wednesday wasn't busy enough with the FOMC in the mix, after the market close on Wednesday, we have earnings due from Microsoft, Meta, Google, of course, Alphabet, and Amazon, plus Qualcomm in the mix as well, who are, of course, another one of those semiconductor names that have been on an absolute tear lately. And then after the market close on Thursday, we have earnings from Apple. So it is going to be a massive week in terms of corporate reports. Not only the MAG7 names, it's also worth bearing in mind we've got bellwether stocks like UPS, they report tomorrow. The big energy names, Chevron and ExxonMobil, they report before the market open on Friday. I think providing the geopolitical news flow remains somewhat subdued, as it has done over the last week or so, then I think it is very much going to be a case of actually equity markets refocusing on that earnings story.
Yeah.
Because really, we all kind of know that the geopolitical issue is going to go away at some point in the future. I think the question equity investors are asking, with the market at all-time highs, semiconductors up 18 days in a row, the question is, are the fundamentals of the market solid enough to support all of that we've just mentioned?
Yeah, no, quite. One, you're going to have to tell me if I'm completely wrong here, but I saw someone mention over the weekend that 1 month S&P vol is sitting near multi-month lows, obviously coming into this week. Obviously, we've got FOMC, we've got 4 MAG7s, we've got Q1 GDP, we've got, things going on in the Middle East and stuff. And also, there's an argument to be made that equities are quite frothy. Have you got any take on that whatsoever? I know it's quite putting you on the spot a little bit, because maybe, we definitely haven't, we do no revision ahead of this, but definitely me throwing Volt in your face isn't the best
I was going to say, you have massively put me on the spot there, because I haven't looked at that for a while. However, I would assume that it is largely a function of vol being inversely correlated with the spot index or the front future or whatever the hell you're looking at, whereby we typically see a relationship where as equities rally, vol tends to decline. I would imagine that's what we're seeing now, but that is very much a kind of throwaway answer because I haven't looked at it, and I probably should have done. But it wouldn't surprise me because,
I make you right.
You kind of look across the board. Yeah, I was joking on Twitter this morning, but FX vol has gone absolutely fucking nowhere. I think the JPM G10 FX vol index is at its lowest level in about 3 months. The MOVE index, which is Treasury vol, that's at its lowest level since conflict broke out in the Middle East. We have seen a big slide in vols across the board, frankly. So, equities should join in with that.
Yeah, again, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that front. Just an interesting one. I know there'll be people kind of lining up some mentioned cheap downside. Potentially, also before I leave you, gold seems to be waking up a little bit.
Is it starting to shine again?
It's starting to, it's got a little bit of a shine on it. Maybe. He says, I say that kind of like tongue in cheek somewhat. We are still bottom of the recent range, but we are kind of, if you're looking for a reason to be happy or optimistic about gold, it's not really putting in new lows. It seems to be grinding up slowly. Again, it's still above that 200-day moving average and whatnot. If it gets below there, which it did, I think it back in late March. It kind of flashed through but closed back above it, if I recall correctly.
Yes, you're right.
Again, we said last week that gold. We actually spoke a little bit in detail about gold last week, about how a safe haven. You want it to do fuck all during kind of moments of kind of turmoil. That's what it's doing. I'm seeing a few people getting a bit giddy again, saying that, this is not going lower, therefore it must go higher. Have you got any view on gold at all?
Do you know what? I was actually going to say it's almost strengthens the idea that it's behaving a little bit like a risk asset, because, we were talking, we speak quite often about how equities need news to get worse and worse and worse in order to sustain downside. gold kind of is demonstrating that as well. The news isn't getting worse, so gold just isn't really going anywhere. I still stand by what I said last week in terms of, I don't see much to get excited about, but that will probably put the kibosh on it now.
Well, especially because Clive keeps WhatsApping when we tell him just to drop it on Twitter. But I can assure you, Clive is WhatsApping us that on the technical side of things, the gold is still short-term bearish above 46.27.
And he said
Clive,
bullish,
put it
not
on
bearish.
Twitter. And he said bullish, sorry. Listen, I can't read too many things at once. Like, Clive, just put it on Twitter, please.
Oh.
Okay, cool. Is there anything else that's coming out or anything else we need to mention?
No, I think we should quit while we're ahead.
Tell you what, apparently I've just been called a prick as well by Clive on WhatsApp. But just one thing I wanted to mention, just to flag, because I don't like it when they go quiet. China seems to be very, very quiet recently. Now, that concerns me. Makes me think something's up. Don't do the eyes, etc., obviously. But yeah, something... Yeah, just keep an eye on China. I've got my spider senses are saying...
But not that sort of eye.
No.
Right, let's call it a day, shall we?
Right, on that note, everyone, hope you had a great weekend. I hope you have a profitable week ahead, and I hope you tune in again tomorrow. Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.
Bye.